we had lots of lovely questions in the chat. I tried my best to answer them. We had quite sort of wide-ranging questions like, do we want the students to have their videos on and off? Obviously, as I put in the chat, I think that's down to the individual teacher and if there's a policy in the institute. But really lovely to chat about different options. So I can't wait to answer any more questions that people might have.
Well, while we're waiting for other people to come up with questions, maybe I can ask one that I really wanted to ask you. And that is, you know, with all this wealth of options that we have with Flipgrid, could you give us some advice on how to best navigate it? What would be your best practice tips on how to integrate it into a classroom, be it at regular schools or for adult learning?
Yeah, sure. So the idea of the webinar was to go through lots and lots of different options. I'm not suggesting that you try everything straight away. I think what I would do personally is I would set up a teacher account, set up a group, set up a topic, and then ask the students to either access Flipgrid via the web or via the app on their mobile devices, add them via username. We had a great question from Neil about what do you do if you're working in, say, a language school and you're not using, let's say, a Google school domain or anything like that. Then the option would be to add people via username, I would suggest. Although I've never been asked that question before, so that's a really interesting question. I don't see why that wouldn't work. I think that would be fine. And then to set a simple task whereby, as I demonstrated in the first video, you as the teacher would then ask a question and then get the students to then reply to that question and then to go from there, really. But I think the importance of moderation, all those other things that I went through in detail, should mean that it shouldn't put people off, I think. And then the whole issue around whether you have the video or the audio, again, that's why I suggested different options. So I think, as with any tool, particularly when you're talking about video and audio and recording the students, they need to go through that process of familiarizing themselves with it. But and then people will be fine, I'm sure. But any sort of speaking task lends itself really nicely to Flipgrid, I think.
And would you mostly focus on speaking tasks and always repeat the same kind of task to familiarize students with it? Or do you think it has benefits to switch it up as often as possible?
That's okay. So great question, but I think that depends on the group, and it also depends on maybe the confidence of the teacher. So it might be, if you're a particular fan of use of technology, it might be that you want to do the simple tasks straight away and then go into something else, for example, screen recording or animation or what have you. Or it might be that you prefer to stick to, let's say, a speaking homework whereby every week you ask a question and then you wait for the students to do their answers and you have them moderated and all the rest of it, but you just stick to that. And if you just use it in that way, I think that offers lots of opportunities. I suppose because I'm a fan of like exploring all the different things you can do with Flipgrid. That's why I wanted to show all the different options. But if you just use it for question and answer, I think that'll be absolutely fine. But if you want to be a bit more creative, there are those other options such as animation and having a boat going across the sea and all the rest of it. Why not? I think some people would really love that, being able to channel their creativity, and I think Flipgrid makes it really simple to be able to do that, I think.
I think there's a question in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Could you read it out to me? Because there's been so many questions, but I may have missed it.
Well, Gary's saying if you could expand on your answer to Neil's question in the Q&A.
Right, so
and we have to scroll up.
Right, so let's have a look. So is it the one, I love the fact that this screen recording option exists? Is that the question? I'll just check. Yeah, sure. Okay. So for the benefit of the video, I'll just read this out then, if that's okay. So I love the fact that this screen recording option exists, but I'm not clear how this transforms learning over showing prepared pictures or pictures chosen by the students themselves. If EdTech aims to enhance learning, how do you believe that this Flipgrid Google Earth enhances learning other than adding novelty value? Okay, good question. I suppose you could regard it as some novelty value, but I also think, as I put in my answer, I think that it brings the learning to life in lots of ways, and it makes it dynamic. And the fact that you can jump from place to place very easily on the screen, you can record it, you can ask questions live, you can get feedback from the students that you can say, so where are we? What's the weather like? And all the rest of it. And as Hedy has said in the chat as well, it's unpredictable, which I think is always engaging for young people. I mean, as with anything, we're all professionals. You can look at something in this webinar and think, I really like that, or you might think, oh, I don't like that so much, I won't use that. And that's down to your professional judgment. If you feel that something will be brilliant with your students, try it out. I always encourage people to give things a go. It might be in certain classes that you might think, well, they'll just think this is a novelty. They just want to do grammar all day. They just want to do writing tasks. They don't want to do video and multimedia. That's absolutely fine. It's just, I suppose, me showing you all the different things that you could do, but it's down to the individual teacher really to decide what will work in their own classroom based on their own professional judgment.
I have to say what I love about it is the interoperability that Flipgrid offers between the different applications. So it's not as random, as using a different tool and a different app each lesson, but you've got your base, you can stick to it. And I think it helps prevent tool fatigue a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that is true to say that with Flipgrid, there are lots and lots of options. That said, it might be, like for example, in the previous webinar, when I looked at Quicker, that's a bit similar to Flipgrid, but it doesn't have all the other options. It just has audio in a thread, a bit like with the Q&A type of option that you get with Flipgrid. But I think on the one hand, some people like to have tools that have lots and lots of different options, and other teachers like to have tools which have one particular function which is particularly good at what it does. So I think it just, as with everything, it just depends on the sort of teacher you are, the sorts of things that you like, and what your students are like, and your relationship with the students, and what you think will work. But I think I think it's fine to have, let's say, a tool like Flipgrid, which has lots of options, but it's also fine as well to have tools which have one particular function that it's just maybe the best way of doing a particular type of activity using a particular tool. It just depends. There's so many things out there, and I suppose it's just about raising awareness of what is possible. Definitely. I see Neil's got his hand up. Did you want to come on the mic, maybe, Neil?
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Thank you very much indeed for that really, I think, very common sense point about, with all of these things, there's a, try it out and see what works for you. I think I'm coming from more of a kind of a methodological approach here, that my view always has been that, technology enhanced learning is where technology actually transforms the classroom, and it allows us to do something well that we couldn't do previously. And I think my fear is that there is always the risk. I can absolutely see the appeal to young learners of going anywhere in the world. It's very exciting, but my concern is, how does it enhance their learning? What is the actual learning outcome that we're wanting to have here? I mean, it seemed to me that, the way you demoed it, inevitably a lot of modal verbs came out, and therefore this could be for talking about potentiality. But I'm just wondering how we make the best use of Flipgrid linked to its purposeful use in order to have a particular language skill or a language point developed, rather than it becoming almost self-serving. And please understand that's not in any way, shape or form meant to be a criticism of your incredibly detailed and really helpful presentation. It's more kind of standing back and thinking, well, how can we enhance our learning of our learners and have a meaningful language outcome at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, Neil. Thank you. So it's also a big question. So first of all, I think we should only use technology when it we can take advantage of certain affordances of that technology, which we can't create either at all or easily in a sort of traditional sense. So one suggestion I would give to the question is that let's say you want to do a speaking assessment in a classroom and everyone's talking at the same time, as it were, and you're doing a speaking assessment and you want, say, traditionally, say, two people coming up the front or one person coming up the front, and then you then ask them questions, that sort of simple Q&A. With Flipgrid, you just need to record your video, and then they can either record in the classroom or outside of the classroom at home, wherever they have access to a device and a connection, and everything is all stored in the one place. You can then give feedback, video feedback or audio feedback. So in my opinion, that's definitely an enhancement on the traditional model and should save a lot of time. In relation to the Google Earth idea that I was suggesting, yes, obviously, depending on the topic area you're looking at or the focus on the verbs you're looking at, the structures you're looking at, you would then base it around that. And it might be, let's say, I don't know, if you're doing something simple like the weather, or you're doing words around, say, different types of accommodation, it could lend itself really nicely to that. It depends on the topic or the level of your students or what you want to then to do with that. But I think the idea of using Google Earth and recording it and asking questions live in that way is, in my opinion, is definitely an enhanced version of compared to doing the same type of activity if you had a textbook, which is not a criticism of textbooks. I just think that if you sort of bring it to life with video and with the fact that you don't know where you're going, and I think that all brings it together. That said, if you didn't want to use the I'm feeling lucky option, you just wanted to go to the search option so you know exactly where you're going, because you want more control over the structures you want to use, so you know exactly where you're going, and you know the language you're going to use, then you could do that as well. Obviously, it's down to the individual teacher to decide how they want to use that particular idea. But I think, I think the first and foremost, if the technology is not enhancing what you can normally do, the question is, why are you using the technology? And so I think it's really important to always question why you're using the technology. And what I've tried to do in this session, as with all my sessions, is to give examples of how, in my opinion, it is enhancing what you would normally do.
Yeah, I also think it's great that you point this out, because in my opinion, it's the biggest pitfall, just using technology for the sake of it. And I was going to ask you about pitfalls anyway, since we've discussed this one already. What would you say are other pitfalls that we should be aware of when using Flipgrid specifically?
Well, I think the one that comes to mind straight away is, what do you do if the students don't want to speak, or they don't want to have their cameras on, and all those things. So I think that a lot of that has to do with the relationship that the teacher has with the students, and it might be to do with the cultural background as well of the students. If they want to, if they're used to working as a group, they're not used to working individually. Maybe they feel very shy. So I think that could be a pitfall for sure. But I think that with encouragement, with modeling, with the fact, let's say if they have to do a speaking exam, reminding them of why they're using the technology to allow them to practice, the fact you can give them private feedback, so you're not embarrassing them or what have you. You can give them private feedback on what they need to do to improve. But certainly in relation to anything to do with cameras, I think what we were talking about in the chat while the video was playing, about the whole issue around what you do with the students, or the policy behind cameras on or cameras off, that could certainly be a pitfall. But I think, as I said, I think that's down to the individual institution and the individual teacher to work out what they're trying to do, and what would work best. And if you have students that are not willing to turn on their cameras and record themselves, and that could definitely be a pitfall. But if you then have to pursue other avenues or other ways of dealing with that. But I think one of the most important things about language learning is the ability to speak and to practice and to receive feedback. So I think Flipgrid fits very nicely into what one has to do in the languages classroom. And therefore, I think just, being kind and encouraging as much as possible to encourage the students to speak. But I think being very aware of the fact that people might not want to all appear in the same topic, that they might want to have moderation turned on so only the teacher sees the videos that the students produce, or it could only be mic only in the way that I've discussed, so they don't see their faces and what have you, then I think that's absolutely fine. It's down to the teacher to work out what will work best.
Another issue some students might have, depending on their background and the setting that you teach at, might be data protection. So what would you tell students if they wonder what happens to their videos, who owns them? Are there any issues with that?
Okay, so that's why I referred in my presentation to the slide which has the link to Flipgrid's documentation about data, student data, because when I've been doing sessions on Flipgrid, and maybe I've had let's say head of department has contacted SLT or has said we'd like to use Flipgrid, and then SLT is saying, okay, what about the data? And then I contacted Flipgrid and said, I've been asked this question, can you give me a link to how Flipgrid handles student data? And that's exactly what they did. I then passed that on to the head of department, who passed it on to SLT, and then it was all fine and they were happy to proceed. So I would direct people to that link to that the policy that Flipgrid have put together around how the data is used, and then go from there. But of course, this is all based on trust, isn't it? I mean, Microsoft is a global company. They are saying that this is what they're doing with the data. If they were to be breaching GDPR or in the States, COPPA and other such guidelines, they would be they'd have major difficulties. So I would refer people to the student data, but basically it's down to trust, which is what I say to teachers when I'm doing training. I'm saying, well, this is what the privacy policy says, but we have to trust them, whichever company it is that has put together this privacy policy, that they are going to adhere to that. So that again could be a pitfall, but it's just down to trust, isn't it? I think. And I know recently, for example, I'm a big fan of Audacity, and there was Audacity is an open source tool, and a company has taken it over, and there was this big thing about them changing certain rules, and then the community sort of expressed their disgust at the changes, and then the company changed them back, basically, which was to do with saying you could only use the tool if you were 13 or above, and they'd be asking information about location and all the rest of it. And the community said, no, this is open source, this should not happen, etc. So I think it's, as with anything, I would, not just Flipgrid, but any tool, I would direct people to the privacy policy, and also check the e-safety policy in your own context, be it in a school or a language school. I would imagine, I would presume that all educational establishments would have their own e-safety policy, and I would adhere to that. And if you're not sure, just check with the person who's in charge of the e-safety policy about such a tool that you want to use, in this case Flipgrid, and say, oh, we'd like to do this, this, and this. Does that adhere to the policy that we've established in our establishment?
Thank you. I think there are no more questions in the chat, so I get to ask even more.
Cool. Bring it on.
How interesting it is to everybody else. But as Hedy mentioned, I work in test development and assessment. So I was wondering, how suitable do you think Flipgrid is for assessing learners, or even just preparing them for tests?
I mean, I think for all the reasons I've talked about, I think it's very good for that. I think that the fact that you can ask the questions, you can then get everybody to answering those questions, the fact you can give feedback. I would have thought that for a speaking exam, it would be a very good tool to encourage student confidence. I think that confidence in speaking is really, really important. And what Flipgrid is great for, as well as other tools which allow you to record your voice. It will give you confidence if you do it over time, repeatedly. Or what you could do is you could the students could do a recording at the start of the year and then answer the same question at the end of the year to then show progression and to show how through regular use of tools like Flipgrid can give them confidence, and then that hopefully would allow them to improve over time. I also think the closed captions option is also very nice in the way that you can then see what you've spoken about. The teacher can get a really good idea of maybe the mistakes that students are making, and then can put in intervention strategies. But I mean, what do you think, Mia? Do you think, based on what I've shown you, do you think it would be a good tool to prepare students for speaking exams?
Oh, absolutely. For speaking exams more than anything, yes. But I can imagine that even for the written part of exams, I'm a fan of having everything in one place. So I was just wondering how to integrate everything then into Flipgrid, because, well, as I said, with tool fatigue, it's always hard. Sometimes students complain about having to sign up for too many different sites and tools. So
I think that's a good point, but I also think there are lots of teachers who complain about the fact that one tool does too many things. And actually some teachers like the fact that you've got one tool that does one thing really, really well, and it's clear and easy. And other teachers like everything in the one place. So it's trying to keep everyone happy, really.
Yeah,
but true. Yeah.
I mean, of course, you don't want a tool that has all different kinds of features that you can't use. Ideally, you want one that offers everything that you need.
Yeah, exactly. But everyone has different needs and different contexts, and working with children or working with adults. So I think with when you talk about ed tech, it's really showing people all the different things it could do. And then I think these sorts of pedagogical discussions are incredibly important, because well, either in this sort of like webinar context or on Twitter, people, I think it's fantastic that people love to say, okay, I'm trying to do X, Y, and Z pedagogically speaking. What's the best tool to do that? And then you'll get people who are, experts in that area who'll say, well, you could try this, or tell me a bit more about exactly what you're trying to do. And then based on exactly what they're trying to do, make different suggestions. Well, you could do this, but if you did that, then this might, or et cetera, et cetera. So I think that having this sort of professional pedagogical discussion around how the different tools work is the way to find the best tool for the job, I think. So thank you for your questions, Mia. Any more? We've still got some time to go. Any other questions? Or from anyone else for that matter? Neil, I'm sure you've got another question for me.
No activity in the chat. Well, could you maybe differentiate a bit and let us know what features are, in your opinion, most suitable for different groups of learners, such as adult children, people preparing for university subjects. So if it is part of a university course, maybe what features would you use for students who have to practice elevator pitches or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I would have thought, let's say, for example, some of those frames that I showed you, they seem a bit aimed at younger learners, or one might argue that doing those sorts of like animations with, Bitmoji characters, etc., might be better for younger learners. But at the same time, I'm sure adult learners, depending on the context, might actually really enjoy those sorts of animation ideas. So I think the question and answer option in Flipgrid could work with any age group. I think that the screen recording option could be used on a very simple level, or it could be used on a much more detailed level. You could, for example, a student could share, let's say, a Google Doc with you, and then you could use screen recording to give video feedback, and then save that to the Flipgrid topic, that sort of thing, and then give them private feedback. So I think that the tools or the options within Flipgrid are very open-ended. So again, I know I've said this already, but I think it would be down to the individual teacher to decide what would work best according to their context. If it's something that, a very serious class with, for exam practice, it might just be just the Q&A option, maybe with some screen recording, rather than the animations. But it might be that for some students, they love that sort of thing, and it might be a great way to unleash their creativity. So I would keep it open, and I would start off with a Q&A, but then according to the class you have in front of you, then maybe explore some other options as well, or let the students decide how they want to present their speaking work.
There's a post here in the chat from Zena about making writing tasks.
Right, so I actually make writing tasks come alive by asking students to post them on Wakelet, okay, possibly with pictures. They can also record them as audios or video presentation using Flipgrid, which can be integrated into Wakelet for your yeah, okay, yeah, absolutely. So Wakelet is, yeah, a great way to collect all the different links or images or PDFs all in the same place. And one of the options within Wakelet, because it's it has that Flipgrid integration, is to add a video as well. So that's a really nice idea from Zena, to incorporate Flipgrid videos within a Wakelet. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I loved. Well, hopefully everyone liked the Wakelet example of augmented reality with Flipgrid that Kathy shared early on. But yeah, why not? Yeah, I mean, in a way, I suppose, yeah. So I suppose the advantage of using Wakelet for that, because I was thinking, why not just use Flipgrid? Why use Wakelet to collect everything together? I suppose the advantage is with Wakelet, you're able to integrate other items, for example, web pages or PDFs or images, along with the Flipgrid videos as well. Yeah, but that would be, to me, that would be a more advanced use of Flipgrid, which obviously Zena is comfortable to do, which is wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing, Zena. That's great.